Diamonds and Dust. Within the walls, there is Lytonia, a utopian nation that does not accept the weak or the defective. Outside the walls are the dangerous and unpredictable wildlands. Neither are safe, and both have their secrets. My name is Destiny Hawkins, and I am the author of Diamonds and Dust. This futuristic dystopian fantasy is one of many episodes portraying characters from the dark fantasy book series, The Descendants. You can listen to this episode at any time, including to fall asleep during study hours, as you commute, and so forth. Below, you can find the links to the Descendants book series, which I highly recommend that you start for better understanding. Otherwise, enjoy the wonders and point of views of characters you'll grow to love. Lime green. That was the color of the woman's eyes, a clear indicator that she was from the Charlotte family. I figured that was why I found myself so confused. How was it that this woman was our enemy? Why was she even out here? Standing across from me was a wild lander with walnut brown skin and frost white hair that glowed from the brightness of the white flames whipping around her. The woman appeared as dangerous as the stories told, her green eyes glowing so bright that both eyes appeared to be entirely filled with green. Why was a member of one of the founding families standing with the wild landers? It didn't make any sense. "Rayenna, get away from her!" Adrian's muffled voice screamed from somewhere behind me. I sucked in a breath of air as I looked down at the ground, my knees pressed into the mud. Then I reached down and placed my hand over a hole in the side of my stomach. Blood drizzled down my suit and onto my knees. I inhaled a trembling breath as I glared up at the woman, the traitor. They called her Emerald, the freedom wilder. Emerald was a Vex bright nearing her middle age, but by far the strongest lighter I had ever fought. If I'd known that it was her village that we were tracking, I would have directed my team somewhere else. This wasn't a fight that we were ready for, not on our first deployment as collectors. Rumors of Emerald and her fight against the collectors had been spreading all throughout the Lytonian military. Things had gotten so bad that we were ordered to report her location for the D7 to handle things. I clenched my teeth and focused my energy on healing the stab wound bleeding out from my side. Nothing vital was hit, but the wound was deep, Emerald's glistening daggers dripping with my blood. Emerald looked from left to right, her frown deepening at the sight of her burning village. I quickly stepped up one foot and prepared to release a flurry of power balls, but Emerald was quick and turned back to me just as she flashed forward and wrapped her free hand around my throat. "You people never learn," Emerald roared, the light in her eyes brightening the dark shadows around her face, her hair hanging over her cheeks. The sight of her fury directed towards me frightened me still, like I was a child again. "This will come back on you." Emerald's grip was tight as she glared down at me, her teeth bared. Gathering my senses, I grabbed at her wrist with my right hand and formed a dagger of my own in my left. Already reading my movements, Emerald jammed her dagger into my bicep, stopping me from stabbing her wrist. I grunted loudly, the sound cut short as Emerald tightened her grip around my neck. "Don't you see what you're doing, girl?" Emerald growled through clenched teeth. "Stop spreading your disease." My heart raced, the consideration of death finally settling. Tears built up in the corners of my eyes. I feared death, but I wasn't sure about what I was leaving behind. This world, I wasn't happy in it. I didn't entirely feel much of anything. "You all are broken," Emerald spat, her eyes glossing with tears. "You are all monsters, bred to kill." Her words hit a nerve. I wasn't a monster, I was just following. "Let her go!" Angela's voice boomed before royal blue balls of fire exploded into the earth around me. Emerald growled and jumped back, evading Angela's attack. I thought that Angela would continue fighting, but she stopped at my side and crouched down to grab my arm. "We need to retreat," I heard Adrian yell as he grabbed my other side. I cried out, my right leg clearly broken as I crumbled forward, unable to walk. Two other members of our squad, Sloan and Falkland, torpedoed past us, flames ejecting from the bottoms of their feet. "No," I grunted. "She's too strong." "They're just distracting her," Adrian reassured. "Let me take her." Angela looked at me for quick reassurance before letting me go into Adrian's arms. Adrian pulled me close and cradled me in his arms before taking off into a sprint towards the shelter of the woods. Because he was a dim, he couldn't get by using flames to propel him forward or hyperspeed to get to safety. That meant carrying me and running as fast as he could on his strength alone. The other option would completely drain him. There weren't too many villagers fighting back, but there were two more to avoid. It was a younger man, also from the Charlotte family, and likely Emerald's son. The other to avoid, I believed, was his wife. "We'll be all right, don't worry," Adrian reassured. With With my head leaning against his chest, I could feel his heart thumping against my temple. It was a familiar comfort, and for a moment I almost allowed myself to sink into him. But then I remembered that we couldn't do that anymore. Adrian and I could never be that close again. Snapping back to reality, I forced all my energy down to my leg. My stab wound finally healed. Once I could get back on my feet, I wouldn't need him to protect me anymore, and we wouldn't be in such a bad position. I could feel Adrian's grip around my body grow tighter, his protectiveness more of a reaction when a villager with bright green eyes and dark brown skin appeared in our path. His eyes weren't exactly like emeralds, but green enough for us to see that he was also a member of the Charlotte family. Without thinking twice about it, I quickly raised my palm to face him and released royal blue power balls back to back. There were so many of them that we could barely see through the cluster, and once I thought that he was finally down, I stopped to find him and one other standing behind two large blue shields. Adrian tensed, unable to fight them and hold me at the same time. Clenching my teeth, I painfully forced my energy to work faster, my knee snapping back into place with a snap that temporarily numbed my leg. Panting, I let go of Adrian and stood beside him. I summoned my inner armor, forming it over my body like a second suit, just as Adrian summoned a machine gun to his hands. We were both dims as well, and would be an equal match had I not depleted most of my energy against Emerald. "I can take them, you go," Adrian said, crouching low. I frowned, observing his beaten condition. "No, we escape. We aren't prepared for this kind of fight." Adrian grimaced, his prideful side peeking through, the side we agreed he wouldn't reveal in battle. We needed to think smart if we wanted to live through tomorrow. "You need to get away," he panted. "And you need to follow orders," I snapped. "We retreat. Backup should be here soon." Adrian's frown deepened. I could feel his tension, but this was a fight to be handled by a team greater than ours. Adrian began shooting in their direction, forcing them to stay hidden behind their shields. Wildlanders weren't accustomed to using our kind of weaponry, so we had the upper hand. It was their wild fighting styles that we had trouble keeping up with. The ferocity of their attacks and willingness to move in close was something we weren't prepared for. Adrian and I sprinted diagonally towards the wooded area. He continued to shoot until something flickering in the light flipped through the air and landed in his shoulder. He groaned something that sounded more like a roar before yanking the blade from his flesh. Since it didn't disappear in his hands, the knife had to be thrown by a bright. Dims used their energy to create weapons, just as the Elims when they summoned lightning, water, and fire. Solid weaponry was typically used by brights. Glancing back at Adrian, I saw with just a look that he was okay to keep moving. A mere flesh wound wasn't enough to stop him. Without a second thought, I turned back around and burst into a sprint, my legs taking me faster than the average dim. I've always had a second energy that I could rely on in my greatest moments of need, and tonight, I needed it to escape Emerald and her villagers. When Adrian caught up beside me, I noticed that he was using pure energy through a slick jetpack-like machine infused to his back. The same energy was ejecting through the bottoms of his feet through a pair of metal boots he summoned. It was one of his newest creations, but still untested. All we knew was that it exerted a lot of energy to control it, so he was probably almost at his limit. Looking up, I was relieved to find that collectors from our camp were now providing backup. As we were headed into the safety of the woods, they were rushing out to capture the remaining live villagers. I just hoped they knew what they were getting themselves into. Emerald's power was that of a Charlotte and more. I asked myself earlier why she wasn't on our side, but didn't take the time to really notice the green glow of her eyes. I thought it was just the reflection from the flames, but it wasn't. That glow was caused by her own energy. Emerald was a defect. Stopping at the edge of the woods, Adrian and I looked back to find that Angela, Sloane, Falkland, and Lily were right behind us. They stopped as well and looked back at the fight. Royal blue, turquoise, and white lights flashed from left to right. Women and children were running for safety while their men risked their lives to protect them, and flames burned through their camp as our collectors continued their attack. I tried not to wonder what the villagers here were doing before we arrived, and I tried my best not to believe Emerald's words. It was when my eyes locked with hers one last time did I feel the truth sink in. Standing in the middle of her burning village, surrounded by the diamond ashes of my comrades, was Emerald. She stood calmly, but her glare was anything but. Her green eyes blazed with hate as she watched me, but I could see that it wasn't because she was some wild savage. Deep down, I knew exactly what she felt and the fury that those feelings could bring out of someone. I knew what it was like to have your entire family taken away. I knew deep down that we weren't the good guys. The next couple of days had quickly passed. Adrian still needed a few days for his wound to fully heal, but the others were all right. After our debriefing, our squad was ordered to go back with the truck and guard our new Lytonian citizens as they sat like caged animals against the bars. Each of them was collared, nullifying their energy, destroying any hopes of escaping. There was an empty pain that came with sitting inside of one of those cages. I could vaguely picture it, but I remembered the emptiness, the fear, and the loneliness of being yanked away from my family and thrown into one. Everything about my world had changed in the most frightening way. I tried not to look at any of their faces as I walked beside them. We had been assigned back to guard duty because it was apparent that we weren't yet ready to hunt as our own squad. The war between Lytonians and Wildlanders was heating up quick, and they needed levels 15 and up to be at the front lines. Looking around at the others walking ahead, I found myself relieved to find them strong and healthy. Back in the academy, they each had become my new family. I could have graduated early, but declined my early release so that I would graduate with them. Because we graduated together, and we already had formed a team, we requested to become a collector squad where we were then tested in our abilities. Once we were granted our request, we had officially become a family. Losing any one of them would tear my heart into pieces. I couldn't lose two families. Looking at Adrian's back, my shoulders had begun to grow heavy. He was upset about the attack and how I used my authority over him. Usually, it took a while for him to get over anything, but things were different now. I wasn't his anymore, so he couldn't rule over me like he had in the past. This situation was between squad leader and squad member, where I had the final say. I guess a part of me wanted to mend things, but then I knew I'd find myself understanding his point of view and sinking into his reasons, as if mine meant nothing. He'd say he wanted to protect me, and he'd say he'd do anything for me, and I would know that he wasn't lying, because Adrian did love me. It was just that his love had become too much. He was still as sweet as he was when we were children, and for a while, he was my protector from the students who sought to harm me. I was a Wilder after all. It was the last name given to any citizen brought within the walls, and it wouldn't change until I was married. Time had passed, and the two of us had started to change. Adrian had become overprotective to a fault, believing that something bad would happen if he wasn't around to protect me, and I had noticed that his aggressive protection had started to weigh me down. He was crushing me. After so many years of being treated as if I were less than nothing, I guess I had grown to wanting to become the best lighter I could possibly be. It was all that I strived for. Adrian didn't understand that. All he ever wanted to do was protect me from harm, and if I were to become one of the best, harm was what I'd be thrown right into. Even though I had become a level 9 above my class, he didn't believe me strong enough to protect myself. Feeling as if I'd never get his approval, I started putting distance in between us. That was what set him off. It was one thing when another student sought to harm me, but the pain was different when it came from someone I loved. When it was Adrian, when I looked into his eyes that day, I only saw pain and rage, maybe even a little fear. His eyes were bloodshot red, as if he'd been crying, and his anger was directed at me. That was the last time we were alone together. Being under the hand of so many in the past, I knew that if I stayed with him, he would continue until I was no longer myself, until I no longer strived for greatness, the very dream that defined me. Now, I was our squad leader and his commanding officer. I knew that his ego was hurt when I made the order to run. I just wished that a part of me didn't want to apologize for it. Why should I apologize for being right? What annoyed me more was the fact that I still felt the need to. I guess I could say that he'd broken the part of me that had common sense long before he struck me. "Water?" a young girl asked, crouching by the cage with her hand wrapped around the pole. My stomach turned. I knew just how thirsty she was, but the physical hunger would be nothing like the emotional hunger she'd feel once inside the walls. I frowned at the girl. "Sit down and be quiet," I snapped. My stomach turned into knots as I watched tears well in her eyes. I couldn't show her any kindness now, or she'd be too weak by the time we arrived to Lytonia. No, I couldn't be too kind to any of these poor people. Surprisingly, Angela gave me a wink and slipped a small canteen between the bars. The girl quickly drank the water down, then hesitantly passed the canteen back to Angela, her cautious eyes focused on me. Angela pocketed her canteen and continued walking beside me. "Why would you do that? You shouldn't be soft with them," I quietly snapped, feeling slightly on edge. Angela sighed. "Didn't you wish someone was soft with you?" I pinched my lips together, remembering how roughly I was handled at the age of 10. They didn't care that I was a child, and I was punished as an adult for any mistakes I'd made. Being a wilder was thought of as a curse, especially by those first sent into the assimilation camps. There, we were finally stripped of everything that made us wildlanders, and those parts of us weren't taken gently. There was so much pain in hating myself and those like me. Why would I want to represent the mountain lands when being a mountainlander led to brutal beatings, starvation, and utter loneliness? When I was finally released into the academy, things hadn't gotten any better. The students were worse. I clenched my teeth. Still, you shouldn't. I looked over at the little girl again, my heart twisting at the sight of her frail body. How much had they been fed since capture? They didn't look as if they'd eaten anything in the last few days. My frown only deepened, but it wasn't at her. I snapped my eyes back down to the gun in my hands, remembering too much of the past. I tried to continue looking away, but the sound of the little girl shrieking had snapped me back to attention. Turning to look where she was facing, I watched as a middle-aged woman sat slumped against the bars, with her dead eyes staring directly into mine. Diamond ashes rose from her body until she crumbled down into nothing. My gun instantly vanished from my hands, and I found myself remembering all too much. Back when I was behind those bars, there were diamond ashes rising almost every night, and in the beginning, I sat trembling in a corner, watching until it was over. Eventually, I finally stopped being so afraid and witnessed through dead eyes as my only family vanished into the air. Angela quickly turned to me, worried at my response. "Rayenna, your eyes," she whispered. "You need to calm down." When Adrian looked back at me, I tensed. I felt myself beginning to panic inside, the rise of it coming all at once. Ever since we were originally assigned to guard duty, I had begun experiencing panic attacks that triggered another type of energy within me. One that would label me a defect. If any of the other guards here saw me, Angela turned to Adrian, who walked back towards me and gently took hold of my bicep. "Let's get you away from here for a moment." I nodded, my body trembling, as we took a step away from the path and walked into the safety of the trees. Adrian and I sat on a nearby cliff and looked out at the trees below us. It was nearly sunset, so the truck had to have stopped for camp by now. The two of us sat quietly beside one another, but there was so much to be said. I could feel it in the air around us. I just didn't want to talk. We hadn't had a real talk since the day he slapped me. Sometimes, I couldn't help but remember the anger and shame I felt from that moment. I remembered the panic on his face when he tried to catch me as I fell, and then I remembered the fear in his eyes when he noticed blood dripping from the side of my head. Adrian voluntarily entered solitary confinement after leaving me there, crying. We never talked about it after that. The bond we shared had been broken that day, but there were still pieces that remained connected. He would always be my family. The two of us awkwardly looked at each other before Angela and Lily found us. Sloan and Falkland were back guarding the truck less than a mile away. "Hey, are you feeling all right?" Angela asked as she sat down beside me. "Yeah," I sighed. My voice trailed off at the thought of the old woman. "We know," she said, resting her hand atop of mine. The comfort of her touch brought a small bit of relief. As a sister to me, she always knew how to make me feel safe. It was hard to believe that someone as strong as her saw me as an equal. When enrolled, Angela and all the others were the few that didn't treat me as if I was some disgusting savage. Lily sat back on her hands beside me and stared out at the forest lands below, her blue eyes glistening under the orange sun. "Do you guys ever wonder about the wilder life?" she asked, her thoughts seeming far away from here. "Ever think our lives could be different?" "That's traitorous talk, Lily," I replied, attempting at being stern. Lily gave me the side eye with a raised brow, then cracked a smile. Between Angela and me, she was the most free-spirited one. She had her own mind, her own opinions, and her own dreams. The wild lands would have been perfect for her. I almost cracked a smile. "They could be," I sighed, "but they aren't. Besides, living in the wild could still result in living in Lytonia. Already being born of the Lytonian nation, that's a blessing." Staring out at the mountain silhouettes just outside the forests, a pain swelled in my chest. Nothing good could come from being a wildlander. I balled my fist under Angela's hand with a deepening frown. "But what good has come from being Lytonian? Can any of us really say that we're happy?" Lily asked. The wind rustled through the trees, screaming through our uneasy silence. I sighed and shook my head, but found myself gazing out at the mountains again. My heart ached with a need to be there. The last time I could truly remember feeling happy was when I was living in the wild. Angela squeezed her hand over mine, comforting me once more. She was the only one here who knew that underneath it all, being away from my true home was utter torment. But nothing good could come from going back. I remembered well the consequences of trying to run, trying to hide. Back at assimilation camp, they always found me. When the sun had completely set, we finally decided to head back to the truck for the night. The four of us were practically dragging our feet, none of us liking guard duty for our own reasons. It was when we heard a loud explosion just up ahead that we started moving with more intent. Angela gave me one look before jumping into the air and raising her knees to her chest. Quickly kicking her legs back, she ejected large royal blue flames from her heels and torpedoed ahead. Lily kicked into her bright speed and sprinted forward. Adrian and I were in a sprint behind them, my metal shield sliding over my arms and legs, then up my neck, finally covering the rest of my face. Adrian's basic cuffs, shoulder band, razor blade calf, and shoulder shields had manifested, his turquoise blue energy bright. "Go!" Adrian yelled. Uneasy about leaving him behind, I clenched my teeth and sped ahead, the speed in my legs picking up to that of a Bright's. I could feel the golden light in my eyes flickering, but pushed my secondary energy deep into my gut, locking it away. I could only trust my squad with my secret, as anyone else would report me immediately. When I finally made it back to the path, I found myself running into a cloud of thick gray smoke, the red emergency light flashing over the cage in the back of the truck. Covering my nostrils, I rushed over to the cage to find it emptied. Panicking, I wondered why it was suddenly so quiet. Where were the other guards? Where was my team? I imagined their bodies disintegrating into ashes and sparkling away into the moonlight, my worst fear possibly becoming reality. Clenching my teeth, I couldn't call out in fear that whoever was out here would determine my location. If I couldn't see, then maybe they couldn't see me either. I looked from left to right, summoning a machine gun to my hands and holding it close to my body as I had begun the search for my friends. "Rayenna!" Adrian yelled as he sprinted through the cloud of smoke. Forming a metal shield in his hand, he slid to a stop and threw it in my direction. I was quick to move out of the way, realizing that a depleter had been standing dangerously close to me. He was dressed in blue jeans and a black leather jacket that embroidered a skull design on the back. The depleter didn't bother moving and allowed himself to be impaled through the chest. He looked up at me through black eyes and smiled through bloody teeth. I pointed my gun at his head and quickly fired without a second thought. The depleter died instantly, but instead of fading into diamond ashes, black smoke had risen from his fallen body. Adrian quickly ran to my side, neither of us understanding what we were witnessing. The black smoke had risen a few inches taller than me, before solidifying back into the form of a young man. Only this time he was completely naked, his eyes filled with darkness, and his platinum blonde hair glowing in the moonlight. A dark smile crept up his lips before he turned to Adrian. "You have a good eye," he said in a low voice. Before either of us could react, he raised his hand, wrapping dark energy around Adrian's neck and lifting him into the air. My eyes widened before I stepped back and raised my gun. Before I could pull the trigger, that same dark sand-like energy wrapped around it and yanked it away. Quick to respond, I summoned another, but the energy had then wrapped around my throat, the sensation of fingers tightening around my neck. Slowly, he approached me, then stopped directly in front of me, his focus on my eyes before observing me from head to toe. "You look like her," the man smiled again. "I wonder if you are her." He cocked his head to the side. "I wonder if he knows you're here." Reaching up, he tucked a few loose strands of my hair behind my ear. I didn't have a clue as to what this man or demon was talking about. There was nothing familiar about him, especially not the energy inside of him. There was no light inside this man whatsoever. The man looked down at me through his black eyes, as if he were searching for something. His face was expressionless, so it was hard to read him, but I could see a question forming on his lips. He was curious about me. Was it because of what I was? Did it have something to do with my tribe? How were we connected? "What should I do with you?" the depleter asked in a low voice, deep in thought. The area had suddenly grown quiet, and I realized that it was because Adrian had finally stopped struggling. I turned to find that his body was motionless, his head slumped, bringing instant tears to my eyes. The depleter cracked a smile. "Tears for the mortal, save them for the next millennium of deaths that you will witness." I could feel the light in my eyes illuminating, gold light reflecting from the depleter's pale face. Suddenly, my body felt powerful and hot, an unfamiliar and destructive energy coursing through my veins. Since I didn't use it often, I didn't feel that I had much control, but with the depleter being so close, I could aim perfectly fine. Opening my palms, I released bright golden flames into the depleter's abdomen, his body shooting backwards through the air. I thought he would land against a tree, but suddenly, Emerald came shooting through midair, swinging a kick so hard at his body that he had broken into two, fading into smoke before disappearing into the air. Adrian and I dropped to the ground, gagging and coughing, but I was quick to recover and ran to his side. When gazing up at Emerald, she glared back, her narrowing eyes seeming to question who or what I was. She must have been watching us the entire time, hiding behind the trees. After hearing the sound of everyone suddenly groaning simultaneously, she turned in the direction of the sounds. "I'm getting my people and leaving here. Do not follow us, Lytonian defect. Besides, you should go before he comes back." I didn't respond, but watched as she disappeared into the smoke. "We need to go and find the others," Adrian grunted. "Yeah," I stood, my legs trembling. "And then we'll make a report." Thank you for listening to When Diamonds Rise, Episode 1 of Diamonds and Dust. If you like this episode and would like to listen to more, please click the subscribe button. Remember that if you would like the full story, check out the links to the Descendants series below. You can listen to the series as audio, or you can read the ebook or paperback. Also, feel free to join my readers team on Facebook and become an official Lyter. There we discuss the series, play games, and have giveaways. You'll also get first look at what I'm working on next. Otherwise, stay tuned for more episodes.
Dust and wind whipped through her dark hair as the earth crumbled around us, and even through her exhaustion, I could see the fierceness in her gray-blue eyes. We had been outrunning the end of the world for a few months now, never able to stay anywhere for too long. Before, when the world was still, we were only surviving the conditions of our nature. But after the rumbling, it wouldn't stop crumbling. So, we ran, and we ran, surviving together, never knowing when the rest of the world would completely cave and swallow us up. All we knew was that we had to keep running. Jada and I both turned to face the collapsing earth rushing towards us. She and I had just gotten through the forests and were on our way to the mountains, where we were told of safety and protection from other survivors of the destruction. They traveled with us for some time before being crushed by a falling tree during another rumbling. We barely even made it out alive, and now we had to escape another attack from the earth. Jada frowned, her eyes flashing white as they had been since the first massive rumbling. We didn't know what it meant, but we had the feeling that she wasn't the only one. There wasn't anything about myself that had significantly changed, besides the fact that I was having unfamiliar dreams. But we did believe that they meant something. After all that time, we still hadn't found out what any of my dreams meant. But we held hope that we'd find out sooner than later. We had all hoped up until that day. When Jada nodded to me, she and I burst off into a sprint together, hoping to put as much distance between us and the crumbling earth. At some point, it should have just stopped, allowing us to stop and catch our breath. But this rumbling was different. This one was almost as bad as the very first, when the world had begun to fall. And we didn't outrun it. We couldn't. The earth was shattering in front of us now, rushing towards us from both the front and back. I could never see where the world was falling to, but there were times when it appeared as if it were falling deeper into another place. The rumbles always left enormous breaks in the earth, making traveling nearly impossible. All that would be left was a deep, gaping hole that seemed to lead into nothingness. No one had ever known what was down there, and even if they fell in, they'd probably never find out. Now, we were trapped, and the crumbling earth was closing in on us from both sides, the back end at our heels. It was almost a relief when we noticed the front end had come to a stop, and I was hopeful that the crumbling would end from behind us as well. So when it had, I felt only a moment of safety before I realized that Jada was no longer beside me. "Ellison!" she yelled as she slipped back, reaching her hand out to me. I quickly whipped around and reached back, her weight dropping and swinging against the stone. Holding tight, I was yanked down to my stomach, my chest sliding to the edge of the cliff. Jada panted, a thank you forming in her soft eyes. We were only friends, survivors that depended on each other after being alone for far too long. But I loved her. I loved her as I would love the woman of my dreams. "Hold on," I said, pushing myself up while pulling her arm. It was when the winds had begun to blow harder and the earth beneath my chest made a cracking sound. Did I begin to panic? Especially when my mind was briefly pulled away from the situation, my thoughts running wild with images and memories that couldn't have been mine. Even with my lost memory, I knew that these didn't belong to me. "Hurry!" Jada urged, snapping me back to reality. I clenched my teeth and pulled as hard as I could. But the moment I pulled her up and was on my feet, the earth broke from beneath us, and we fell. Quickly reaching up, I grabbed at the edge of the cliff, Jada's wrist tight in my grip, and we hung there, praying that I was holding something solid. I looked down at Jada, her eyes wide with fear, yet trusting. Haven't I trusted someone this way before? It felt all too familiar, but I wasn't sure. "Don't worry," I said. "I'll pull us." I was cut short by my own grunting, my temples pulsating so painfully that it felt as if my head would explode. Squeezing my eyes shut, I had begun receiving more images of a world that was not mine, but it was a world that was real. Years of life flashed before my eyes. The life of a boy, a son, a brother, and a king. The life of Vexton, the god of rage, now known as the god of love. He sacrificed his love for the future of our people. The earth beneath my hand began to crumble. Jada grunted, fear filling her red-rimmed eyes. "We're going to fall. I can't hold us up," I thought, my mind still filling with memories. "It'll break under both of our weight, and I can't die." "Ellison." My name sounded more like a question from her lips, and I could hear the confusion. "What are you?" I kept my eyes closed. I must live. I'm the only one. All I heard was the sound of Jada's gasp as I let her wrist slip through my fingers. Unbelieving what I had just done, I looked down, catching her eyes one last time, catching the pain and confusion of my betrayal. I have to live, I thought, tears filling my eyes. I have to. For years, I wondered if that was really what I was thinking the day I let her go, or was it from my own fear of falling? I could never give any other reason besides my being a coward. I tried to tell myself that it was because I had to live and help create the new world. Vexton had given me his memories for the very purpose, so my life added more value. I told myself that there was no time, and I had to make a quick decision. I told myself lies. The truth was, that I was just afraid to fall. Even more so then because I finally knew what was down there. So, I had to let go. And I used being more important than her as my excuse to do so. As I sat in my small hut and peered at my villagers through the window, I wondered if I would make up for my cowardice. I suffered much from my guilt over the years, and when I finally found the peace I had been seeking, I wished to share it with the world, to finally rebuild. The village was only a start, and because we are united in our cause, we would grow. Never would we suffer from that chaos again. The chaos before and after the great destruction would not follow us into our future. Standing from my chair, I pulled my long white hair into a ponytail and wrapped my white cloak over my shoulders, a large black letter L embroidered in the center of the back. I wore my cloak proudly, embodying the great man I was meant to be, as I lead our new world into a utopia, into Lytonia. Years ago, when I was jumping from place to place and speaking with different people all over the world, I managed to establish a small number of survivors who believed in what Lytonia stood for. Those first few survivors each trained hard under my watch until they gained the ability to jump into their lighter forms. Those survivors had then helped me spread the word of our new utopia and were eventually known as the founding families. I walked out of my hut and into the fresh air. It was still early, so most of the villagers were asleep, while others were up and beginning their daily chores. When creating Lytonia, we decided not to follow any of the old ways of our world before, but instead started a completely new society. We set new laws and expectations, all of which the founding families voted for. It was decided that we needed to implement martial law early on. That way, we would create a nation of soldiers, forever bonded in peace. With discipline and power, we would never fall into chaos again. When the early storms were caused by the three god brothers, we lost control of ourselves. Maybe for a time we could maintain order, but we allowed ourselves to go rampant. We didn't contain, protect, or save anyone. It was every man for themselves, all until I met Jada. My heart ached at the thought of her. It was a pain that I knew would never go away. I loved her more than I thought, and I would have to forever live with the reality that I let her die from my own cowardice. "Mr. Ellison," a young girl called from across the dirt path. "Hello." I turned, avoiding my thoughts of Jada, and remembered to show kindness to the child, as I would everyone else here. She was a Kali, the white band on her wrist a clear indicator of her class. Sometimes I looked at the young Kalis and pitied them for being descendants of the damned, but then I would remind myself that our Kalis could be molded into loyal Lytonian citizens. They could change. They were the hardest to control after winning the Battle of Light against the rising rebellion of Somas and Kalis. But with the blessing of Vexton, we regained control, better equipped to deal with them now. That war had proven to us that the Somas and Kalis could not be trusted with their own leadership, our first conclusion when establishing the laws of the three classes. We Vexes were meant to rule and enforce in order to maintain peace. That was what Vexton wanted of us. Most of today's villagers agreed with the Lytonian way. They agreed that the descendants of the dark gods were to be conditioned in a way that they would never follow the chaotic ways of their ancestors. In our earlier years of development, it was the Kalis and Somas who band together to oppose the world we wished to create. With more trained Vexes outnumbering their rebels, we maintained order and made the decision to have the Kalis and Somas conditioned into absolute loyalty to our cause. Once they finally understood, they decided to stand with us. It took years to attain their obedience, but they were eventually on our side. Their leaders willfully sacrificed their lives for all to see, displaying a public execution in hopes that they will move their loyalties to us. They had. This was how we kept order in our new world. It was how we made sure that we maintained peace. After maintaining peace for so long, we understood the necessity of assimilation and conditioning. We needed to make the people forget the old world, and over time, we had accomplished that very goal. Maybe not completely, but there was no mention of what used to be by the citizens, just of what was to come. When the little Kali appeared to be shying away from me, I remembered to give a warm smile and a wave. The girl's smile grew, her eyes lighting up. Then she ran barefoot up the path to report for her daily servant duties, her stained white dress blowing in the wind behind her. Looking up at the sky, I saw that it was about time that the Kali and Soma children were headed to their workstations, while our Vexes, Somas, and Kalis of age were training as soldiers. It was the children that essentially kept our town clean and in order. The older Somas and Kalis' duties were to serve the families of training soldiers and high-class citizens while they focused tirelessly on bringing greatness to our nation, no matter what their gifts may be. Smiling in satisfaction, I walked down the path with my hands behind my back, nodding and waving at the young soldiers in training, running off to the training grounds outside the gates. As the sun began to rise higher in the sky, more villagers were filling the pathway, heading to their destinations. I stopped at the entrance of the tall wooden gates that shielded us from the outside world and watched as the young ones jogged through and onto the open field, surrounded by tall, rustling trees. The training grounds were just ahead, some trainees already sparring for fun as they waited for their instructor to arrive. There was laughter among the youth, bringing a small smile to my lips. The sound of laughter from my people gave me hope that we would succeed in creating the perfect world. I chuckled to myself. It feels perfect already. Stepping back, I looked up at the tall gates as they began to close and wondered how we would go about building the wall discussed in our last meeting. The Kalis would be Lytonia's best option for building it, due to their natural strength. The Vexes must remain training for the collector program, so the Somas will have to take over servant duties until the walls are completed. Afterwards, we'd reintegrate them back into their citizenship, only I'd like to reward them with more freedom. This would be their final test of loyalty. I placed my hand on my chin in thought. This would also solve the issue of maintaining control over the other classes down the line. There was concern that there would be future uprisings, that there would always be a Soma or Kali who believed themselves more than what they were. But with generations of servitude, there would eventually be a time where every Soma and Kali citizen would know and accept their place. They wouldn't even question it. They would one day accept that they are the lesser beings, meant to be controlled at our will. They will need us to, for we are the saviors of this world. As for their reward, I could create a system that both kept them in line while allowing them equal opportunity. After the years that will be spent building this wall, they would deserve a gift, a thank you for serving their nation. Maybe one day they'll prove to be as good and as true as we Vexes are. Somas and Kalis were known for their betrayal and disloyalty, as Symmetrius and Calison's descendants. I turned around and faced the village, one day to expand and grow. It wasn't the walls that we should have been focused on at the moment, but the village itself. We still slept in huts, and our ground was a dirt path instead of pavement. It was time that we finally rebuild. I will discuss the use of the dark descendants with the council, I thought as I turned to walk down the path that led to the council hut. I always found myself in awe at my creation, the world I created in tribute to Jada. I knew my duties as the wielder of memories was to bring us all together as one. But after Jada's death, after what I had done to her, I understood the kind of world we were meant to live in. And it wasn't a world meant for the weak. It wasn't a world that was meant for the man I was in the past. Jada was always the strong one. When she met me, I was helpless and alone. I had no memories, so we figured I hit my head during the first rumble. I couldn't remember who I was, but I knew that I was afraid of everything. At times, I couldn't understand why, in moments of danger, I was nothing more than a coward. Why was it always Jada that had to protect me? People sometimes tried to harm us when we weren't running from the end of the world. It wasn't always safe around other starving humans, and when we came across them, I found that I was rarely ever any help. Sometimes, the moment I felt in danger of another person, the only thing I could ever do was stand there and look at them. The guilt I felt from allowing Jada to fall consumed me. After everything she had done for me, I chose myself and let her go. The worst thing was that I lied to myself about why I allowed her death. I placed myself above her, and then I lost her. That was the truth. I would probably never love another woman again. There was no time for love, and I did not deserve it if there were. I wasn't a trustworthy man when it came to my heart. How could I be without all my memories? My reactions towards a woman's love felt unpredictable, even to myself. Sometimes, I was grateful that I couldn't remember all the details of my past. The images in my dreams were dark and painfully vivid. There were dark rooms, a basement of sorts, and the faint smell of blood. And then there was the hum of a man, his voice deep and frighteningly joyful. I remembered pure terror in my dreams as he dragged me by my wrist into the darkness, but I couldn't remember anything surrounding that. I couldn't remember the man or the place he held me in, but I could remember the pain. I remembered being in constant trepidation for whatever was to come. I was a weak boy that had grown into a weak man, and my weakness was what killed Jada. That weakness will not be tolerated in our utopia. My utopia. When the weekly council meeting finally ended, we exited the tent and dispersed into the sunset, waving our goodbyes. As usual, Emery Charlotte walked the paths with me, observing the village as we discussed the future of our nation. As a young woman, she was one of the first to follow me in my path to greatness. While searching for followers, I found her and her people starving on the broken mountain with no safe way down and no understanding of their powers due to their constant need for survival. After teaching them what I could, they had no choice but to escape due to the last few rumblings. The mountain was going to crumble. Only a handful of the Charlotte tribe survived when it finally had, and the ones who lived followed and helped bring my vision to reality. The Charlotte tribe, now known as the Charlotte family, would always serve as strong allies. I am the reason that they continue to exist this day. Emery, her green eyes glistening in the dimming sunlight, smiled as the youth soldiers ran back to their homes. Doors opened, and the hut lights shined onto the path, welcoming families awaiting their young. Even the Soma and Ka-Li children appeared happy to return to their homes after a long day. They would learn to appreciate these days, and when the new order is announced, they will strive to find their way back to them. One day, they will prove to deserve this freedom again. I looked down at Emery, her expression calm as she looked ahead. Her dark hair fell in waves over her shoulders, the darkness of her skin and hair a complete contrast to the white cloak she was wearing. It made everything beautiful about her stand out. The sudden sound of yelling ahead stopped us in our tracks. Some of the other villagers stopped to see what was going on. Explosions of yellow flames now erupting from left and right, heading in our direction. Emery and I were instantly on our guards, those wild yellow flames clearly coming from a god's child, the darkest of creatures to take form of Calison's and Samatrius's darkness. A defect. Screams erupted as villagers who had caught a flame were running for their lives. Only a few seconds passed before diamonds began to rise. A deep frown formed on Emery's face, her expression deadly. Just as she remembered the day of red diamonds. It was because of that day we knew well to never give a defect a chance to ever repeat history. That day is the reason this part of the village is so far behind. After the destruction, we were back to stage 1. Defects were too dangerous, powerful, and out of control. We were to kill any within or outside our walls on sight. "I can handle this," Emery said, just before pulling out her dagger and sprinting in the defect's direction. With the path now cleared, I could see that the defect was a young man, maybe not even 18 years old yet. His eyes were wild as he sprinted in our direction, his yellow irises glowing bright as flames burst from his palms. He displayed the look of panic and fear, but I could see through the lie. He enjoyed murdering my people. His kind only existed for the purpose of destroying us, and thus, they must be annihilated. Emery was like a flash in the air. One moment she was beside me, and the next she was fighting the defect. His skills were decent, but no match for hers. Emery Charlotte was one of the strongest fighters in her family, trained by me in the art of lighter jumping. Using my teachings, she created her own use of it, becoming a force to be reckoned with. When the young defect froze in place, his hands shaking as he held them out in front of him, he spoke. "Please, just let me leave," he cried. "I don't want to hurt anyone else. I just want to go." Emery tensed, her only weakness being her heart. Emery was the youngest of the council, her resolve somewhat shaky in moments such as this. I believed in her loyalty to the nation, but it was apparent that she would always be the weak-hearted one when it came to compassion. She was always the compassionate one. I suppose that part of her was why I cared for her. She didn't fear being compassionate in the world of strength that I was creating. She didn't fear me. Emery lowered herself as she did before charging at another person. When the defect turned the direction of his palm towards a Vex villager, she flashed towards the defect. Simultaneously, her lighter form took shape and tackled the villager onto the ground, dodging the flames. The moment was so fast that I doubted anyone even noticed the glowing lighter form of Emery flashing through the air. It disappeared the moment that she collided onto the ground, an ability she hadn't yet mastered. Emery, now one person again, stood with the dagger in the defect's belly. I could see the discomfort in the way she stood, her back rigid as she held the dagger in his stomach. She was heaving, but otherwise fine. The defect whimpered, blood drizzling from his mouth and onto his ripped shirt. I just wanted to leave. I didn't want to hide anymore. Tears fell down his cheeks as he stared into Emery's eyes. She stared back, her expression frozen. This isn't a perfect world. Agitated by his words and Emery's weakening response, I strode over to them, summoned a knife to my hand, and sliced it across his throat. When blood spurted onto Emery's face, she let go of the dagger with a shaky hand, the defect's body falling into diamonds and dust. She appeared shaken at first, her eyes blinking through the blood dripping down her face. But when her gaze met mine, she slowly began to regain control of herself. Although her compassion was what made her who she is, in order for her to be the best version of herself, she was going to have to change. I was going to help her with that. That thing was no human, Emery, I reminded her. There is no need to feel for it. Emery gave a slow nod before wiping the blood from her face. She then picked up her dagger and placed it back in her waistband, her eyes directed on the yellow stone left in the defect's place. You should wear it as a necklace, I said, slowly picking it up. It would stand as a symbol to your strength. Admiring the jewel, I smirked. I'll have it made into one for you. Emery's only response was to stare at the stone, her expression uneasy, but she wouldn't deny me. Looking around, I noticed how our soldiers in training were working together to put out the yellow flames. Our Elims were at work summoning energy, while our Brights rushed for buckets of water. Our Dims provided medical attention to help the villagers heal. This is the perfect world, I stated, undoing the defect's last words. Look at us. Look at how we respond to such a situation. Everyone is working together, just as Vexton wanted. Chaos will never rule us again. When I turned to Emery, I saw that she was no longer looking at me, but at the people. Her expression was mostly unreadable, her youth and wisdom intertwined into thoughts. No one else would notice the torment in the way she stood, silently replaying the moment in her mind. I knew that she was in shock, but I had to keep pushing her. I had to harden her. I agree, she said in a low voice. As you should, I nodded. Now, we must find the traitorous family who raised him and burn the woman who birthed him, just as he burned our villagers. Can you find them for me, Emery? I could see that Emery was struggling with her thoughts, but she would never turn me down. Her loyalty to me was absolute. Of course. Her voice was low, her body still rigid with shock. Good. We must show the people what happens when they hide defects within our walls. Emery nodded and had begun walking in the direction that the defect had come, everything about her displaying control. I was the one who knew her deep down. She was suffering. And Emery? She stopped, only raising her chin to hear my next order. You will be the one to execute them. Emery's body tensed before her shoulders slowly lowered. Then she continued on, disappearing into the night.
Thank you for listening to The Beginning, Episode 2 of Diamonds and Dust. If you liked this episode and would like to listen to more, please click the subscribe button. Remember that if you would like the full story, check out the links to the Descendants series below. You can listen to the series as audio, or you can read the ebook or paperback. Also, feel free to join my readers team on Facebook and become an official lighter. There we discuss the series, play games, and have giveaways. You'll also get first look at what I'm working on next. Otherwise, stay tuned for more episodes.
The moment I opened my eyes, I found myself already eager for the day's adventure. I gazed up through the hole in our tent and smiled at the gray clouds, the yellow suns reflecting from one side, creating shadows beneath the clouds. The blue sky only added to its beauty. Folding my hands over my chest, I turned my head to find Mama and Papa sleeping together on the far side. Mama was beautiful, perfectly fitting in Papa's protective arms. She could protect herself perfectly fine, as she was my trainer most of the time, but when Father was around, she allowed him to be the protector. Sometimes, after weeks of hunting, when he was finally back, she'd start smiling the way she only did when he was around. But when he was away, she was tense, and I always had to stay close. We lived a little way from the rest of the tribe, but not so far out that we couldn't run for help in the case that the suited men came around. Mama didn't know that I knew about them. On one of Papa's hunting trips, the only one I had ever been allowed to join, we had come across a group of suited people. They were headed towards the forests, surrounding some kind of wagon that kept people in cages. We were far away, up in a mountain, but my father was so worried that we'd be seen by them that we had to stay hidden in a small cave for an entire night. He didn't tell me much at that moment, but on the way home, he explained about how the suited men had completely wiped out his tribe and entire family when he was just a boy. Mama was all who escaped with him, back when they were just friends. He said that he had only heard of there being one survivor from his tribe, but she was likely executed by now. The only person who could have possibly survived the gruesome trip to the walls was their tribe daughter, a title only given to the gods, sons and daughters born in the mountain tribes. Papa explained that the only reason he and Mama had even escaped was because their tribe daughter stopped to fight, or allowing the two of them to get away. He cracked a sad smile when he said that she had probably already planned to turn around after she was sure that they were safe. That was just like her. Being the tribe daughter, people were always somewhat wary of her. Papa and Mama were her only friends, so she showed her appreciation for them by protecting them in any way that she could. Their friendship had always involved her getting him out of trouble. Papa described his last memory of the tribe daughter who was trained from childhood to be the tribe's protector. She was facing the suited men, her red hair blowing in the wind over her back. Blood dripped from her fingertips. Her stance both weakened and threatening as she formed a royal blue metal shield on one arm and a sword in the other. Even as a child, she was a force to be reckoned with. When Mama and Papa escaped, they found a home at our cousin tribe. The night we spotted the suited ones was the only time I had ever seen Papa show any fear. He held me so tightly that night, I almost thought I'd suffocate. I would never forget how his hands trembled, just like Mama's hands sometimes trembled when she thought I wasn't looking. Taking in a deep breath, I turned my head to face the opening of the tent. The wind blew, revealing the outside world. From where I lay, I could see the land spread out below the cliff a few feet away from our tent. There were green trees below, and I could see the shimmer of a lake. My favorite morning view. Silently, I stood from where I lay and walked outside, the sun instantly warming my skin. It was quiet up on the mountain we lived on. The wind, bugs, and trees, the loudest sounds around me. I grabbed the tip of my braid hanging over my shoulder and fiddled with it while admiring the nature that was my home. I always loved coming outside, sometimes just to listen to the silence. It was Mama who could understand the hidden language spoken in the wind. Sometimes, when she thought that she was alone and I was hiding somewhere nearby to watch, she'd come out and sit on the ground, cross her legs, and close her eyes. She once told me that she was doing something called meditation, and when she was meditating, she could silence the world and understand the words spoken between the breaths of the wind. I tried to understand it a few times, but there was never a voice that I could hear, just the loud thoughts in my head screaming for me to do something more along the lines of an adventure. When I heard the flap of our tent, I looked back to find Papa stepping out of it. His face was hard, as it was every morning just before he spotted me smiling back at him. I had no idea why Papa always awakened as if he were ready for a fight, but whenever he saw me or Mama, he'd instantly go from a grizzly bear to a black bear. "Up early again?" Papa asked. I looked out over the cliff. At some point today, it would finally be time to begin the day's fun. With Papa home, I could have a little more freedom than being stuck with Mama. If there was ever a time that she did anything fun, it was probably in her past life. Yeah, Jasmine and the others should be up soon. She has to bring her little sister along, so it takes her longer than usual to get here. Now that all the men are back, Jasmine says her parents always want the tent to themselves. I shrugged. Said it was something about alone time? Anyways, now Jackie always has to come with us, and she can never keep up. Papa chuckled as he stepped up beside me. "You always have so many words in the morning." I chuckled with him, my cheeks warming. "Sorry, I just always have so many thoughts." I shrugged. When he placed his hand over my shoulder and I fell into his side, I understood why my mama let her guard down with Papa around. He felt like protection and safety, kind of like how the mountains protected us. He just made us feel safe. I looked up at his big brown eyes. They were kind when turned towards me and Mama. They could sometimes seem frightening, but I knew he'd never hurt us, so I didn't let it scare me. I actually admired how intimidating my Papa looked. He was a tall man with dark olive skin, like mine and Mama's, and had dark brown hair that hung to the back of his neck. It was always hot, so he was usually shirtless with a pair of trousers he called jeans. At least that was what he called them after returning from a long hunting trip one day. His chest, arms, and abs bulged as if he were always ready for a fight, and over time, I started to believe that he was. I guess that was because he was always ready to protect us. "How has your training been going? Learn anything new while I was away?" he asked. I smiled. "I'm getting stronger." Papa chuckled. "Really? Then show me." I gave Papa a mischievous grin before springing at him, the power in my legs pushing me straight at him. I aimed my fist for his chin, but of course, I missed. Mama did mention that springing at my opponent head-on wouldn't always work, but I thought I'd catch Papa by surprise. Papa's eyebrows furrowed as he quickly stepped to the side and let me flit by. He was a bright, so he could see my movements even quicker than Mama, who was an elim. Before allowing me to completely get away, he grabbed my ankle while in midair and flung me back to the ground with a force that sent me rolling over the dirt. The blow was light, but enough to get me excited. Quickly getting back to my feet, I sprinted at an angle before turning in to attack Papa from the side. He had already read my movements and stopped me mid-plan, flashing in front of me instead. Before I could come to a stop, he backhanded me so hard in the chest that my legs kept going without me, and I found myself crashing onto my back. Papa stood over me, his eyes appearing hard, but I knew him. "You're faster." "You didn't really let me show you anything," I sighed, slightly annoyed. He chuckled. "You've shown me enough." Papa reached his hand out and helped me to my feet. When Mama came out, She summoned flames through her palm and started the morning fire near the tent. "Breakfast will be ready soon." I heard Jasmine complaining to Jackie about something nearby. They were right on time. "It's all right, Mama. I'm not hungry," I said as I began to run off. "Sandra, you should eat your breakfast." Mama's voice trailed as I jogged down the path. "I'll grab some juicy fruit. I'll be back for supper." "Be safe," I heard them both yell as I stumbled down the hill to a stop. Now, surrounded by trees on the mountain path, I faced Jasmine and Jackie, both different in age but nearly identical in features. "You guys finally made it," I said excitedly. Jasmine rolled her eyes, stopping them on her little sister's head. "If Jackie wasn't so slow, we could have been here earlier." Jackie frowned, her blue eyes annoyed. "I want to go back." Jasmine's eyes widened as she puffed up her chest, her temper ready to flare, just before she calmed and shook her head. "We can't. Mama and Papa need some time alone, so you're stuck with us. Or more so, I'm stuck with you." "I want to go back." Jackie's face scrunched hard until tears began to fall. Jasmine rolled her eyes again with a huff before flicking her long black braid over her shoulder and leaning her weight into her spear. I chuckled at the two of them, their personalities so different. Jasmine was always kind of the mean one, where Jackie was just a plain old crybaby. Maybe she was a crybaby because Jasmine was so mean? Well, she wasn't mean to me, but she didn't make many friends with that attitude of hers. Jackie didn't make many friends either, but she was just a kid. Most of the time, kids her age stayed with their parents, or in our case, hung out with her big sister and closest friend. The three of us were almost like family. I didn't make too many friends either, but I didn't care much for visiting the tribe settlement. Not as much as I cared about exploring and adventuring. Sometimes, the other kids would come around to join us on our adventures, but after that, we wouldn't see them for days or even weeks at a time. Jasmine was my only consistent friend, which made me feel special since she didn't really like anyone. I wasn't even sure if she liked her own sister. "So?" Jasmine cocked a brow, her blue eyes in contrast to her dark olive skin. "What crazy idea do you have today?" I smiled and started walking down the path. "Let's go." Jasmine and Jackie followed behind, arguing as usual. I had my eyes on what I could see of the clouds through the trees. Small rays of light peeked between the leaves, giving a slight glow to the greens and yellows surrounding me. I took in a deep breath of air and closed my eyes as I exhaled. For a moment, I felt the slight breeze of the wind and tried to hear it again, like Mama when she was meditating. That ended early when I tripped over a rock and stumbled down the steep hill. Since the hill rounded a curve that turned into a cliff, continuing forward, I stomped my foot into the ground using my bright strength and stopped myself just before sliding over the edge. When I looked back, I saw that Jasmine was sliding down behind me, urgency in her eyes. She stopped at my side with a relieved sigh. Wow, and I thought Jackie was a lot to look after. I chuckled nervously as I looked over the edge. Yeah, me too. Jasmine and I looked at each other before bursting into laughter. Our laughter stopped when Jackie stood unsteadily on the hill, crying about needing help coming down. Jasmine grumbled and rolled her eyes before stomping back up the steep hill. After we made it around the mountain, we stood at the edge of the path and watched the tribe settlement below. They were hidden well in between the trees that was surrounded by mountains on every side. Nearby was a lake where we spotted most of the women and children collecting water. Just high up enough, we could see between the mountains on the far side. We weren't completely protected by them, but it gave us all the illusion that we were. "We're going down to the settlement?" Jackie asked in excitement. For a moment, Jasmine looked down at her sister with a sad expression. I didn't know why she avoided the settlement when it came to taking Jackie, but figured she just didn't want the responsibility of watching her around so many people. Jasmine sighed, then frowned. Mama and Papa said no. "But why?" Jackie whined. "No one ever takes me down there." "Because you can't." Jasmine turned to me. "So, where's the adventure then?" "Oh, just ahead at the cross paths, we'll head up the side of the mountain." I shrugged. The adventure is finding us a yellow orb. Jasmine rolled her eyes. Another orb hunt? Don't you get tired of chasing those? We never catch any. I gave a mischievous grin. Yeah, at night. I placed my hand on my hip. Papa says that they can be caught during the day. They're slower and sometimes sleeping. Oh, Jasmine nodded, like Jackie. She shrugged and continued on. Jackie frowned before marching after her. She probably was unable to put the insult together, but she just knew that her sister had said something unkind. I chuckled and followed behind. Barely halfway up the mountain, I found a slightly leveled area where we would be able to run and chase the orbs freely. It also helped that there were so many trees, creating shadows for us to spot the orbs more clearly. When they were sleeping, their glow had a small pulse, barely noticeable in the light, but they could be seen in the shade if someone were searching. Found one first, Jasmine yelled as she sprinted past me in a blur, the force of her speed causing me to stumble back. I felt a challenge rise within me as I lowered my stance and began to search frantically with my eyes. Yeah, but you didn't catch one first, I yelled just before spotting one ahead of me. It was awake and slowly floating upwards, towards a hill of boulders. Found one, Jackie finally yelled, her voice filled with childlike pride. I'll beat you too, I thought as I raced after the sleepy orb. It swayed in different directions before finally landing on the ground behind a boulder. Slowing my sprint to a stop, I crept towards the boulder, my hands ready to finally capture a golden orb. I didn't know what I was going to do with it when I caught it. Likely, I would let it go. I had just always wanted to touch one and feel its fur. Orbs were hard to catch, the wind between your hands and the orb practically causing it to float around your grip. Catching one was something Brights could brag about, demonstrating our speed and control. I grinned at the thought of catching one before Jasmine. She won at just about everything, especially combat. The least I could do was beat her at finding a fuzzy ball of light. Ready to pounce, I leaped around the boulder and spotted the orb, but froze in place, unable to move. The orb was where I thought it was, but it was sitting on the back of something large and covered in slick black fur. It was laying down, its big silver eyes trained on me, with two large white fangs that curved out past its chin. A black mountain saber. I swallowed, afraid to make any sudden movements. Papa had only told me stories about the mountain sabers, so I knew to fear them, especially since he was afraid of them. The mountain saber gave a low growl, the golden orb floating off its back and swishing past my face. Its fur brushed my bicep. A bead of sweat slid down the side of my cheek, my heart racing. I have to run. Taking a slow step back, the mountain saber jumped to its feet, the next warning growl causing my legs to shake. For what felt like forever, the saber and I watched each other. I wasn't sure what it was thinking, but it couldn't have been anything nice. Sabers were very protective of their territory once claimed. I had no idea that there would ever be a saber so close to the settlement. They tended to stay high in the mountains, only to ever come down or choose a new territory when they needed to hunt. But the mountains surrounding our settlement had no prey. That was why our hunters had to leave for weeks at a time. This saber must have traveled into our mountains searching for food that wasn't there. And now he had us. Caught one! Jasmine suddenly yelled in triumph. Startled, the saber drew its claws, the points shooting into the dirt, before lunging at me. With a scream, I barely got out of the way, leaping down the hill and landing on my shoulder. Clenching my teeth, I tumbled down the hill until sliding into a boulder against my back. The pain shot through to my legs, the air leaving my lungs, and I didn't have time to move before the saber sprinted in my direction. Sandra, run! Jasmine yelled. Just as the saber came to a leap, a spear sliced through the air, the tip of it cutting through the saber's side. With a growl, it twisted through the air, crashing to its side a few feet away from me. Quickly, I scrambled to my feet and sprinted down the hill. I could taste blood in my mouth and my back was in pain, but that wasn't going to slow me down. The saber was only momentarily distracted, but now it was on full go. The moment Jasmine saw me coming, she sprinted towards Jackie and grabbed her, running back down the way we came. I was right behind her, the two of us now on the path toward the settlement. I could hear the growls of the saber behind us and was almost relieved when we came to the opening. In full speed, it wasn't so far away. Too bad the saber was faster. Sprinting down the hill at Jasmine's side, the saber leaped at the sisters. Jackie screamed when the saber collided into them, the two crashing to the ground and splitting apart as they tumbled down the hill. Jackie stopped and slammed into a tree, falling unconscious, but Jasmine was still going, and her fall was brutal. She rolled over rocks, stumps, and momentarily went into the air before finally coming to a stop after slamming onto the opening of the path, unmoving. "Jasmine," I screamed, my voice echoing through the trees. I cringed, my eyes widening with frightened tears as I worried for my friend, but I couldn't worry for too long. The saber wasn't done. Running back onto the path, the saber stood between me and Jasmine. I slid to a stop, my legs trembling. I suddenly heard the sound of a faint cry from behind and remembered that Jackie was still up there. She needed her sister. A twinkle of something sparkling shimmered behind the saber as it floated into the air, and for a moment, I was distracted by the sparkles. More and more rose into the air, floating and disappearing into the ray of light that peeked through the leaves. Before I knew it, the saber was directly in my face, its claws high in the air. I looked in between the bladed claws, noticing how the sparkles shimmered away. Where were they going? The saber's claws sliced across my chest, its middle claw dragging down the center. The pain was sharp, the shock of it causing me to fall onto my back. I panted, still keeping my eyes on the sparkles, as tears slipped through the corners of my eyes. As the saber's large face hovered over mine, I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry, but all I could do was pant and wait. Somebody help me, I thought. Papa. As if he could hear my thoughts, I recognized the sound of my papa's roar. He was on the saber in seconds, grabbing it by the back of its neck and swinging it against a tree with so much force that I could hear the sound of something cracking and popping. The saber's growl was cut short as it dropped onto the ground in a heap. Papa rushed over to me, his worried eyes wide and frantic, as he gazed down at my chest. I just stared up at him, numb and unable to move. I could feel blood dripping down my body, and there was a squishing sound when he placed his hands over the cut, but it didn't hurt. Not the way that I thought it would. When I looked up again, I noticed that the sparkles had stopped. Papa. I blinked away my tears, the world feeling different all of a sudden. Like none of what happened was real. It had all happened so fast, it couldn't have been. We were just having fun, living a normal day. Where did the sparkles go? For the third time in my life, I saw the look of fear on my papa's face. The second was when he found me after the saber had cut into me, and the third was just now. I didn't understand. Why did he look that way? Why did he look so sad? So afraid? Papa pinched his lips together, then he took in a deep breath. Just focus on my energy. Focus on your papa's energy. You remember. We've practiced flowing. You remember. His soft words brought me back to the present, and the pain in my chest becoming more noticeable. Closing my eyes, I cringed and focused on my papa's energy flowing into me. He had taught me how to energy flow when I was young, but we only practiced every once in a while because it was really an adult practice. With experience, there were other levels to it. One could help another person heal. Just like we practiced, okay? Wave in, wave out, Papa repeated as he brushed my hair back. Wave in, wave out. As his words echoed in the distance, I had to make sure he remembered to do the same with Jasmine. She had fallen pretty hard. Don't forget to help Jasmine, I breathed. She's hurt, bad. I opened my eyes and stared up through the hole at the top of the tent, the clouds slowly floating by in gray and white swirls. When the sunlight peeked through, I moved my arm to block it from my eyes. Suddenly feeling a sting in my chest, I grimaced, then frowned. Right, I had forgotten already. My throat ached, the memory of Jasmine's last moments flashing behind my eyes. I wished that I had done something more to help her. Then maybe, sniffling, I wiped my eyes and sat up. Mama and Papa were already up and about. I could smell Mama cooking something outside the tent. Looking down at my bare chest, I frowned at my healing wound. The other 2 cuts had completely healed, but the one in the center was slow to mend itself. If it didn't heal soon, it was going to become a scar. Then I would always remember that day. My lips trembled as I pulled my knees to my chest, dropping my head over them to muffle my sobs. If we hadn't gone on that stupid mountain, if I hadn't chosen that stupid mountain. A gentle hand rested over the back of my head, startling me. Looking up, I found myself gazing into Mama's comforting eyes. Her straight, shoulder-length hair hung at the sides of her face. Being so close, I couldn't help but let my lip curl over as I threw myself into her, ignoring the pain in my chest. Mama wrapped her strong arms around me, holding me close until I finally stopped crying. Nothing feels okay anymore, I said, numbly. I hate it. I understand, Mama whispered as she rubbed the back of my head, my body limp in her arms. I lost friends before, and nothing felt okay for a long, long time. Does this feeling ever go away? Mama paused. Yes, then no. Jasmine was your closest friend. You'll always remember her. You'll always remember what happened. But it doesn't have to be the only thing you remember. When I started listening to the wind, I began to remember things about my friends, my family, things that made me happy, things that made me angry, things that I learned from them. She sighed. That was what made it easier to carry on with life. I thought that they were gone because I could no longer see them, but the lessons I learned from everyone was what kept me from feeling so alone. Your Papa too. We both remembered everything our families taught us. It just took us some time to get used to them not being here. My heart ached again at the thought of Jasmine's frown. She was always frowning, an almost comforting expression. I missed her so much. That's the hard part? Mama released a breath. That's the hard part. There was a long silence as I lay in peace. Then I sniffled. Can we try listening to the wind together? Yes, we can listen to the wind, but you need to eat first. Following Mama out of the tent, Papa's eyes widened in surprise as he bit into his meat. It had been a while since I had come out for anything besides relieving myself. The 3 of us ate in silence together. I could feel Papa looking at me the whole time, but I was too ashamed to look back. Seeing the hurt on his pained expression was too much. It made me feel as if I had done something wrong. Maybe I had? Visiting the mountain was all my idea. After breakfast, Mama and I sat at the edge of the cliff with our legs crossed and our eyes closed. Where I thought I would be focusing on the wind, she wanted me to focus on my breath. She told me to create the wind using my breath, then focus on it until everything else fell away. She mentioned that it would take a while for me to understand and said something about me being too young to get it. But if I started practicing seriously now, then I would eventually get the hang of it. I would finally hear the wisdom of the wind. When Mama had her fill of stillness, she patted me on my shoulder and headed back to start working on lunch. I stayed seated, focused on my breathing. If meditation could help make everything feel a little better again, then I would do what I could. I no longer wanted to keep remembering the worst moment of my life, and I no longer wanted to see the wound on my chest. I just wanted peace, like Mama. Opening my eyes, I immediately shielded them from something golden that flashed in the distance. At first, I thought it was coming from one of the golden orbs. Then I thought it was the lowering sun. But as I looked closely, the flash came from something on the ground. My eyes widened as I jumped to my feet. Out in the distance, on the rocky plain, I spotted 2 trucks with glistening metal cages on the back. Beside it were suited people, each walking with some kind of weapon in their hands. Blinking, I stared down at one particular woman with long red hair that gently blew in the wind. She was staring directly at me, her face void of all emotion, and her eyes reflecting a golden glare from the sunlight. "Suited people," I whispered, fear climbing up my spine as I stepped back. "They found us."
Thank you for listening to Diamonds in the Light, Episode 3 of Diamonds in Dust. If you liked this episode and would like to listen to more, please click the subscribe button. Remember that if you would like the full story, check out the links to the Descendants series below. You can listen to the series as audio, or you can read the ebook or paperback. Also, feel free to join my readers team on Facebook and become an official lighter. There, we discuss the series, play games, and have giveaways. You'll also get first look at what I'm working on next. Otherwise, stay tuned for more episodes.